There are two kinds of power women hold. The first is the kind everyone sees, the title, the position, the uniform pressed sharp enough to cut. The second is the kind no one sees until it's far too late, the balance in an account no one knew existed, growing quietly in the dark like roots beneath concrete. I'm Rebecca Harper, 45 years old, Lieutenant Commander, Naval Intelligence, 16 years of service. That's what people know. What they don't know could fill a banker's box, and it has. 3 of them, actually, sitting in a storage unit in Norfolk with documents no one in my family has ever seen. This story starts on a Thursday night in October, but it really began 18 months earlier. That's when I made a decision I thought was about family loyalty. Turned out it was about testing who valued me versus who valued what I could provide. The alarm goes off at 5:10 every weekday morning. I've never needed it, not really. When your life runs on 2 separate schedules, your body learns to wake up before the noise starts. I shut it off after the first buzz and lay there for 30 seconds, listening to the quiet hum of the building around me, the air vent clicking on somewhere down the hall, the neighbor's shower running through the wall, the distant sound of traffic already building on the highway. This apartment is small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that's more hallway than room. The furniture is from IKEA, assembled carefully on a Saturday afternoon 3 years ago, while Ethan handed me screws in the right order. The couch is gray. The coffee table has a water ring I've never managed to remove. The walls are beige because that's what the lease allows. I could afford better. That's the part no one knows. I move through my morning routine the same way I always do. Shower, coffee, the Navy uniform already pressed and hanging on the back of my bedroom door. Lunch packed the night before. Turkey sandwich, apple, granola bar, nothing that requires thought. I don't rush. Rushing creates mistakes, and mistakes in my line of work don't just ruin your day. They ruin operations, compromise assets, cost lives in ways you never see coming. By the time I walked into the kitchen, Ethan was already at the table with his notebook open. He lines up his pencils like he has a system only he understands. Blue, black, red, then mechanical pencil on the far right. 10 years old and already allergic to anything last minute. "You're up early," he shrugged without looking up. I wanted to finish this. That's Ethan. Some people call kids like him anxious. I call it learned behavior. When you have one parent with a job that doesn't bend, you learn to plan ahead. You learn that flexibility is something you provide, not something you ask for. I poured him a glass of milk and set it next to the notebook. He drank without being told, another habit neither of us remembered teaching him. "Are you leaving today?" The question wasn't dramatic. No emotion attached, just a check-in. A confirmation of what he already knew from the calendar on the fridge. "Yes, I'll be back tonight." He nodded and went back to writing. I didn't explain where I was going or what I'd be doing. I never do. He knows I work for the Navy. He knows I wear a uniform and go to meetings that run long. That's enough for a 10-year-old. More than enough, considering what he doesn't know. What he doesn't know is that after I leave the office at 5:30, after I pick him up from the neighbor's house and make dinner, and help with homework and tuck him into bed, I open a second laptop, the encrypted one, the one with files labeled Harper Security Consulting, with contracts from defense contractors who pay me $85,000 per project to assess their cybersecurity infrastructure, the one that shows quarterly revenue numbers most people don't see in a year. I started the business 6 years ago, back when Ethan was 4 and the divorce was still fresh and raw. James had taken a position in Japan, remarried, new family, new life, and I was sitting in the same apartment wondering how single parents were supposed to do it all on a Navy salary. The answer came from a former colleague who'd gone private sector.
"You're wasting your skills in government work," he'd said over coffee. "You could make triple doing contract assessments."
I didn't want to leave the Navy. The pension, the structure, the mission, it mattered. But I also didn't want to struggle. So I did both. Harper Security Consulting LLC, registered in Delaware, operated entirely outside business hours. 3 clients the first year, 8 clients by year 3. Last quarter, I cleared $780,000 in revenue. My take-home, after expenses and taxes, was just over $400,000. No one knows. Not my parents, not my sister. Definitely not Caroline, who looks at my 2019 Honda Civic and my Target wardrobe and my rented apartment and sees exactly what I want her to see. a single mom doing her best, stretched thin, making it work, but barely. The truth is more complicated. The truth is that 2 years ago, I paid $850,000 in cash for a 5-bedroom house at 847 Sycamore Lane in Richmond. It's zero point 0.3 miles from my parents' house. It's zero point 0.4 miles from Caroline's house, the one she's so proud of with the brick facade and the 2-car garage and the mortgage she can't quite afford. The house is empty. I haven't told anyone I own it. I'm waiting for what? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe for Ethan to be old enough to appreciate why we lived small when we could have lived large. Maybe for the right moment to prove a point I haven't fully articulated yet. Maybe just to see who'd be happy for me versus who'd immediately ask to borrow money. I learned that lesson young. My parents' generation didn't talk about money, but they certainly fought about it. I watched my father's brother show up every few years with some new crisis, some emergency that required a loan that was never paid back. I watched my mother's sister do the same. I watched my parents give and give until there was nothing left to give. And then I watched those same relatives stop calling. Money people know you have is money they think they're entitled to share. That was the lesson. So I built mine where no one could see it. The investment portfolio started small. Index funds, boring stuff. The kind of advice you get from any financial planner with half a brain. But I read, I studied. I learned how defense stocks moved, how government contracts shifted markets, how to read the patterns that came from sitting in intelligence briefings and understanding what was coming before the public did. Nothing illegal, nothing close to insider trading. Just pattern recognition applied to publicly available information. 16 years of consistent investing, compounded returns, and a side business that generated more income than I knew what to do with. It added up. $1.2 million in investments, $1 million in business equity, $850,000 in real estate that's now worth $920,000, $180,000 in liquid savings, a pension building every year I stay in service. Total net worth, $2.3 million, give or take, depending on the market. And I live in a $1,400 per month apartment, drive a car I bought used, and pack my son's lunch in a Tupperware container from the dollar store. People think that's sacrifice. I call it strategy. We left the apartment at 6:15. I walked Ethan to the bus stop, even though he'd started saying he didn't need me to anymore. At 10, he was testing independence the way kids do, wanting to be grown up, wanting to prove he could handle things alone. I let him have that in small doses, but walking to the bus stop wasn't negotiable, even if I didn't say why. The morning was cool, early September air that hadn't decided yet whether it was still summer or finally fall. Ethan walked beside me with his backpack adjusted just so, straps even, weight distributed. He'd learned that from me, probably. The need for everything to be just right. The bus pulled up exactly on time. Ethan climbed the steps, turned around, gave me a quick wave. I waved back. The bus pulled away, and the day shifted gears. The drive to base was 40 minutes of familiar road. Same route every morning, same exit, same gate where I showed my ID to the guard who'd seen it 1,000 times. By the time I parked and walked into the building, I'd already run through the mental checklist of what today required. 2 briefings, 1 conference call with NCIS, a review of updated threat assessments from the Pacific Fleet. At the office, no one cares that I'm a single mom. They care that reports are accurate, timelines are met, and nothing falls through the cracks. I like that. No guessing, no performance of concern, just expectations and accountability. The day moved in blocks of classified information and careful documentation. This was early September, and I'd been in what I now recognize as a holding pattern. 18 months earlier, March of the previous year, I'd made a choice that seemed straightforward at the time. Caroline had called, voice tight in a way she didn't usually let show. Mark had been laid off from his engineering firm. It was temporary, she said, just a gap. But the mortgage refinance they'd done the year before was biting back. Adjustable terms, bad timing, numbers that didn't work without 2 incomes. She didn't ask outright. She never did. She talked around it, about stress, about the kids, about how embarrassing it was to even bring up. I told her I'd look at the paperwork. Co-signing wasn't dramatic. It was math, credit scores, debt-to-income ratios, risk assessment. I knew exactly what it meant. I also knew the house mattered more to Owen and Emma than to the adults who lived there. So I signed. Quietly. No announcement. No conditions spelled out because I assumed respect didn't need to be negotiated. When the first shortfall notice came 2 months later, I covered it. Set up automatic transfers. $2,800 every month, clean and on time. No one called to ask questions. No one mentioned it at Sunday dinners. I didn't remind anyone. It stayed in a separate box in my head. Family help, not leverage, not a favor to be cashed in later. That was March. By September, I transferred over $40,000 and hadn't thought much about it beyond the automated confirmation emails I received each month. What I didn't know yet was that David had gotten his job back in May. 4 months of transfers had continued after the crisis ended, and no one had mentioned stopping them. But that realization came later. In early September, I was still operating under the assumption that family helped family, that my financial stability was meant to support people I loved, and that Caroline's occasional comments about my life choices were just sister dynamics. Annoying, but harmless. The first Sunday dinner that mattered happened in mid-September. I say that mattered because we'd been having these dinners monthly for years. Same house, same time, same routine. But this one marked the beginning of me actually paying attention to patterns I'd been ignoring. I got the text from Caroline on Tuesday. Sunday dinner this week. Mom wants everyone there. Thought it would be good for Ethan. Family time. Family time. That phrase always sounded like both an invitation and an assignment. I typed back, "We'll be there." Sunday came the way Sundays do. I spent Saturday catching up on laundry and reviewing a contract proposal for a new client, a tech firm in Arlington that needed a security audit before their DoD certification review. The proposal would net $95,000 if they accepted. I'd send it Monday. Ethan spent the afternoon reading, curled up on the couch with a book about space exploration. Every so often, he'd look up and tell me a fact he'd learned, and I'd stop what I was doing and listen because that's what mattered. Not the money, not the secrets. Just the moments when my kid wanted to share something with me. For dinner at my parents' house, I dressed carefully. Jeans, a sweater, nothing that screamed military or money or anything other than ordinary. I took off my watch, a Cartier I'd bought myself last year, $12,000, the only truly expensive thing I owned, and replaced it with a $40 Timex from Target. Old habit. The drive to Richmond took 40 minutes. Ethan counted things out the window, a game he played with himself that I'd never quite understood, but also never questioned. When we pulled into the driveway, Caroline's Lexus SUV was already there, parked at an angle that took up slightly more space than necessary. "Your aunt's here." "I know," Ethan said, and something in his voice made me look at him more carefully. He was staring at the house with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You okay?" "Yeah." Too quick, too automatic. I filed it away for later. Inside, the house smelled like roasted chicken and garlic, the same smell that had filled this kitchen for 30 years. My mother hugged Ethan first, then me. My father nodded from his chair in the living room, eyes still on the television, even as he acknowledged our arrival. Caroline appeared from the kitchen with a smile that had been practiced. "There you are. We were starting to wonder if you'd make it." I checked my watch, the cheap one. We're 15 minutes early. She laughed like I'd made a joke. "I know, I'm just teasing." But she wasn't. Not really. There was always an edge to Caroline's comments, something that felt like concern on the surface, but landed like criticism underneath. We'd grown up 3 years apart, close enough to share friends, but far enough apart to compete for different things. She'd gone into teaching, married David when she was 27, had 2 kids by 30. I'd joined the Navy, married at 28, divorced at 35. Different paths, different choices. Except somewhere along the way, Caroline had started treating my choices like failures dressed up as independence. Dinner was set quickly. Plates passed, small talk filled the empty spaces. Caroline talked about Owen's football team, about Emma's piano recital, about how busy everything was. She talked about busyness like it was currency, like the more activities her kids had, the more successful she was as a mother. Ethan ate quietly, cutting his chicken into precise pieces. I watched him organize his peas into a small pile, then his carrots into another, separating everything, creating order on his plate. Halfway through the meal, Caroline leaned back and smiled at Ethan. "So, how's school going?" "It's good." "That's great. You still in those advanced classes?" "Yes." "Smart kid. Takes after his mom, I guess." The compliment should have landed well. it didn't. There was something in the way she said it, the slight emphasis on, I guess, that made it feel conditional. He works hard, I said. Oh, I'm sure he does. It's just. Caroline trailed off, took a sip of water. It's good he has structure. He has structure. Of course, I just mean, with everything. Everything. She glanced at my mother, then back at me. Your schedule, the demands. It's a lot for one person. I kept my voice even. We manage. I know you do. I'm just saying kids need consistency, stability. Two parents, predictable routines. You know what I mean? The room didn't change. No one raised their voice. No one reacted. But something shifted, subtle and unmistakable. Ethan's fork stopped moving, just for a second, just long enough for me to notice. My father cleared his throat. Who wants more potatoes? The conversation moved on. Caroline talked about vacation plans, a Disney trip they were booking for spring break, something about the importance of family memories. I heard the words but stopped processing them. All I could focus on was Ethan's shoulders, the way they'd drawn in slightly, the way his breathing had changed. This wasn't the first comment. I realized that sitting there, this was just the first time I'd been paying close enough attention to see how they landed on my son. After dinner, we helped clear plates. In the kitchen, Caroline stood next to me at the sink, rinsing dishes before loading the dishwasher. You know I'm not criticizing, right? I know. I just worry about Ethan sometimes. Worry about what? She handed me a plate. Just that he's so quiet, withdrawn. Boys his age are usually more outgoing. He's not withdrawn. He's observant. Maybe. Or maybe he's picking up on stress he doesn't know how to process. I set the plate down carefully. What stress? Caroline looked at me like I was being deliberately obtuse. Come on, Rebecca. Single parenting. The Navy schedule. I know you're doing your best, but kids notice when things aren't complete. Complete. You know what I mean. A two-parent household, stability. He has stability. She smiled, that patient smile that made me want to break something. If you say so. We finished the dishes without speaking. On the drive home, Ethan stared out the window. I kept the radio off, letting the quiet settle between us. You okay? Yeah. The word came too fast, too automatic. When we got home, he went straight to his room. I heard his backpack hit the floor, then the quiet click of his desk lamp turning on. I stood in the kitchen longer than I needed to, staring at the counter like it might offer some kind of answer. The next few weeks moved in their usual rhythm: work, school, homework, dinner, repeat. But I started noticing things I'd been missing. The way Ethan checked the calendar multiple times a day. The way he asked if I was proud of him for things I'd always assumed he knew the answer to. Taking out the trash, finishing homework early, setting the table without being asked. One afternoon in late September, I found him stacking the mail into neat piles, even the junk. You don't have to do that. I know, I just thought it would help. Help with what? He hesitated. Stuff. That night, while I was washing dishes, he stood in the doorway and watched me. Not in his usual way, like he was waiting for the right moment. Mom? Yeah? Do you think Dad would have stayed if you didn't have your job? I turned the faucet off. The kitchen went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. No, I don't. Are you sure? Yes. He looked down. Aunt Caroline said some jobs make family hard. I took a breath. Slow, controlled. Some jobs are hard. That doesn't mean they destroy families. He nodded. She said kids can feel it. What do you feel? He thought about it like he was choosing words carefully. Like I should be better. That landed harder than anything Caroline had said directly to me. Because this wasn't about me. This was about what my 10-year-old son had internalized from months of subtle comments and loaded observations at family dinners I'd thought were harmless. I sat down across from him. You don't need to earn your place here. You already have it. He nodded, but his eyes stayed cautious. The second Sunday dinner happened in early October. My mother called midweek with the usual invitation. Caroline's bringing a dessert. What can you bring? I'll pick up rolls. Perfect. 4 o'clock? We'll be there. This time, I paid attention from the moment we walked in. Watched how Caroline greeted us, warm to Ethan's face, but with an undertone I was finally hearing. Noticed how she positioned herself in conversations. Always the helpful one. Always the stable sister. Dinner followed the same pattern. Polite conversation, updates about kids and work. But this time when Caroline made her comments, "You're so busy, how do you keep up? Some kids need more one-on-one time than school can provide." I saw them for what they were. Not concern. Competition. After we left, Ethan was quieter than usual in the car. Do we have to go every time? The question surprised me. Do you not want to? Long pause. I don't know, it just feels weird sometimes. Weird how? Like Aunt Caroline wants me to say something's wrong when nothing is. That night, after he went to sleep, I opened my laptop and did something I should have done months earlier. I pulled up the bank account with the automatic transfers, checked the history. 18 months. $50,400 transferred to Caroline and David's mortgage account, plus the car loan I'd paid off last June. 8,000. Plus the emergency medical bills last September. 3,200. Plus the Christmas loan they'd never mentioned paying back. 1,500. Total $61,600. I stared at the numbers for a long time. Then I opened a new browser window and searched for David's company. Found their website, clicked on the team directory. David Bennett, Senior Project Engineer. The photo looked recent. I clicked through to his LinkedIn profile. Employment history showed Bennett and Associates with no gap in service. According to this, he'd been continuously employed since 2019. Either the profile was wrong, or Caroline had lied about how long the unemployment lasted. I cross-referenced the dates. David had posted about a successful project in June of the previous year, congratulated a colleague in July, shared an industry article in August, all while I was transferring $2,800 every month to cover a crisis that had ended after 2 months. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark apartment, the small space I'd chosen deliberately. The modest life I'd built as camouflage, the financial power I'd accumulated in secret while being treated like someone who needed help. And then came the Thursday night in mid-October that changed everything. I was taking out the trash when I saw it. A piece of paper folded once, sitting on top of the bag, not crumpled, not torn, just folded carefully, like Ethan had thought about it before deciding no one should read it. I unfolded it on the kitchen counter. School assignment, clearly. The heading said "My Family" in his neat handwriting. I live with my mom. She works very hard because I don't have a dad here. I try not to need too much so she doesn't get more tired. Sometimes I wonder if things would be easier if I was different. My mom works important jobs for the Navy. Aunt Caroline says kids need 2 parents. I think my mom wishes I was easier to take care of. I read it 3 times. Each time, the words settled deeper into my chest. My son was apologizing for existing. And I, a woman who'd spent 16 years analyzing threats to national security, hadn't noticed the threat growing in my own kitchen until it was written down and thrown away. I didn't cry. Crying is what you do when you don't know what else to do. And I always know what to do. That's the problem, maybe. I know how to compartmentalize, how to keep work separate from home, money separate from family, truth separate from what people assume. But sitting there at 10:47 on a Thursday night, holding that piece of paper, I understood something I should have seen months ago. I wasn't protecting Ethan by staying quiet during Caroline's comments. I was teaching him that his worth was negotiable, that keeping peace was more important than defending his value, that silence meant acceptance. I'd spent 16 years in naval intelligence, learning to identify patterns, assess threats, and intervene before small problems became catastrophic failures. I'd spent 6 years building a business by recognizing vulnerabilities and addressing them strategically. But I'd spent 18 months funding my sister's life while she undermined my son's sense of self-worth. And I'd done nothing except tell myself it wasn't worth the confrontation. I didn't throw away the essay. I slid it into a folder and left it on the counter, face down. Then I opened my laptop, not the work one, the encrypted one, and logged into the business account. Balance. $340,000 available. Another $780,000 in receivables expected over the next quarter. Contracts in the pipeline worth 6 figures. A net worth that had crossed $2 million while my family assumed I was barely making ends meet. All of it hidden. All of it strategic. All of it meaningless if my son thought he was a burden. The next morning, Ethan ate breakfast without lining up his food. That caught my attention more than it should have. He moved slower, quieter, like something inside him had dimmed. "Bus coming early today?" He shook his head. We walked to the bus stop at the usual time. He climbed the steps, turned around, waved. But he didn't smile. I stood there longer than usual after the bus pulled away, hands in my pockets, watching the empty street. By the time I got to my car, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever I'd been calling keeping the peace was teaching my son lessons I never intended. That his existence required apology, that taking up space was presumptuous, that his mother's love came with conditions. That wasn't a lesson I was willing to keep passing on. The decision didn't come like thunder. It came like sunrise, gradual, inevitable, changing everything just by showing up. I was done being invisible, done testing, done waiting for the right moment to reveal what I'd built. The right moment was now, and it started with understanding exactly what Caroline had been doing while taking my money. The Friday morning after I found Ethan's essay, I woke at 4:47, 23 minutes before the alarm. My mind had been running calculations all night, the kind that have nothing to do with threat assessments or classified intelligence. Numbers kept surfacing. $61,600, 18 months, 2 months of actual unemployment versus 16 months of continued payments. I didn't get up right away. I lay there in the dark, listening to the silence of the apartment, thinking about the difference between helping someone and enabling them, between generosity and being used. By the time the alarm went off, I'd made my first decision. I needed documentation. Not just bank statements, everything. A complete picture of what had been happening while I assumed the best. I got up and started my usual routine. But something felt different, sharper, like a lens coming into focus after months of blur. Ethan appeared in this kitchen earlier than normal, already dressed. He didn't say anything about the essay. I didn't either. Some conversations need the right timing, and 6 a.m. before school wasn't it. You sleep okay? Yeah. The word came too quickly again. That automatic deflection he'd been perfecting. At the bus stop, he climbed on without the usual wave. Just a glance back, then gone. I watched the bus disappear and felt the weight of what I needed to do settling into something concrete. At work, I went through the motions of my regular duties. Morning briefing, threat assessment review, coordination calls. But during my lunch break, I drove to a CVS 3 blocks from base and bought a spiral-bound notebook. Plain cover, nothing special. The kind of thing you'd use for grocery lists or meeting notes. Back in my car, I opened to the first page and wrote a single word at the top: pattern. Then I started documenting. Every comment I could remember from the past 2 years. Every subtle dig. Every loaded observation, every moment when Caroline had framed concern as criticism. The list grew faster than I expected. September, 2 years ago. Some kids need more structure than schools provide. November, single parenting is so hard. I don't know how you do it. December, Owen asked why Ethan doesn't have a dad at home. I didn't know what to tell him. January, the Navy must be demanding. Do you ever think about something more flexible? On and on. 23 comments about Ethan needing a father figure. 17 about my work schedule being too demanding. 9 observations about stability and consistency, always framed as neutral facts. 5 direct questions to Ethan about his feelings, each designed to extract vulnerability in front of an audience. I filled 2 pages before my phone alarm reminded me I had a 1 o'clock meeting. That afternoon, I pulled up the mortgage documents on my encrypted laptop. The cosign agreement was straightforward. Caroline and David as primary borrowers, me as guarantor in case of default. The stated reason: David's recent unemployment affecting their debt-to-income ratio. I opened a new tab and searched for Bennett and Associates, the engineering firm David had supposedly been laid off from. Found their website easily. Clicked through to the team directory. There he was, David Bennett, senior project engineer. The photo was recent enough that I could see the gray creeping into his hair at the temples. Gray that hadn't been there 18 months ago. I clicked through to his LinkedIn profile. Employment history showed Bennett and Associates, 2019 to present. No gap, no indication of unemployment at all. But LinkedIn could be outdated. People forgot to update their profiles all the time. I dug deeper, scrolled through his activity feed. June of last year, 15 months ago, he'd posted about a successful bridge infrastructure project, congratulated his team, shared photos from a site visit. July, professional development certification completed. August, shared an article about sustainable engineering practices. September, posted about his company winning a regional award. All of this while I was transferring $2,800 every month to cover a crisis that had supposedly started in March and continued through when exactly? I pulled up my bank records and cross-referenced everything. March, first transfer. Co-sign agreement dated March 15th, citing David's unemployment as of March 1st. May, David's LinkedIn showed continuous employment, active posting, project involvement. June through September, transfers continued, $2,800 monthly, like clockwork. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. David had been unemployed for 2 months, maybe. The LinkedIn activity suggested he'd never stopped working at all, but I'd give them the benefit of the doubt on timing. 2 months of genuine need, 16 months of continued payments, 16 months during which no one had said, "Thank you, we're back on our feet now, you can stop." My phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. Mrs. Harper, a woman's voice, professional and warm. "This is Jennifer Mills from Arlington Tech Solutions. We received your proposal for the security audit. We'd like to move forward." The $95,000 contract. I'd almost forgotten about it in the past 24 hours of realizing my family situation was built on assumptions and lies. That's excellent news. When would you like to schedule the kickoff? We coordinated details, site visit dates, deliverable timelines, payment structure. She asked intelligent questions about methodology and compliance standards. I answered on autopilot, the part of my brain that handles business operating independently from the part still processing betrayal. After we hung up, I sat there holding my phone, thinking about parallel lives. Harper Security Consulting was about to bring in another 6 figures. Harper, the sister, was funding a lifestyle that didn't need funding anymore. The question wasn't why Caroline kept taking the money. People rationalize all kinds of things when it's easier than having an uncomfortable conversation. The question was what she'd been saying about me while taking it. I called Ethan's school and asked to schedule a meeting with Ms. Rodriguez, his teacher. The secretary put me through. "Mrs. Harper?" Miss Rodriguez's voice was warm. "Is everything all right? I'd like to discuss some behavioral changes I've noticed. Do you have any availability this week?" We scheduled a meeting for Tuesday during her planning period. That weekend, I took Ethan to his Saturday soccer game. He'd started playing this season, not because he loved the sport, but because it was one activity where being quiet didn't matter. You just showed up, ran, tried your best. I stood on the sideline with the other parents, watching the game but not really seeing it. My mind kept circling back to Caroline's comments, the money transfers, the essay I'd found in the trash. "Rebecca?" I turned. Lisa Martinez, another Navy mom I'd met at a command function several months back. Her son Jake was on Ethan's team. "Hey, Lisa. I didn't know Jake played soccer. Just started this season." She smiled. "Same as Ethan, right?" "Yeah." We watched the kids for a moment. They were terrible, but enthusiastic. That counted for something. "Hey, I've been meaning to tell you." Lisa's voice shifted, became more tentative. "Your sister spoke at our church women's group last month." Every nerve in my body went on alert. "My sister?" "Yeah, Caroline." She gave a really moving talk about supporting family members going through difficult times, about being there for single mothers who are struggling. The field kept moving, kids running, ball bouncing, whistle blowing, everything normal, while my understanding of the situation rearranged itself into something much worse than I'd imagined. What exactly did she say? Lisa's expression shifted as she picked up on something in my tone. Just, about how hard it is to balance everything as a single mom, how important family support is. She talked about helping with expenses, being available for her nephew when his mom's schedule is unpredictable. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Did she mention me by name? No, but... Lisa looked uncomfortable. "Afterwards, someone told me she was talking about you. I just wanted to say I think it's wonderful how close your family is. How Caroline steps up to help." I managed a smile. "Right. Thanks for letting me know." On the drive home, Ethan was quiet. He'd played okay. Not great, not terrible. Just okay, which seemed to be his baseline for everything lately. Did you have fun?" "It was fine." "Just fine?" He shrugged from the passenger seat. "I'm not very good at it." "You're learning. That's the point." "Owen's better at sports." "Owen's been playing for 3 years. You just started." Aunt Caroline says Owen is naturally athletic. She says some kids are just born coordinated and some aren't. I kept my eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. What else does Aunt Caroline say? Long pause, then quietly. "She told Emma that you work a lot because you have to, because it's just you." When did she say that? "Last Sunday, at Grandma's. I heard them talking in the kitchen." I took a breath, let it out slowly through my nose. What did Emma say? She asked if we were poor. And what did Aunt Caroline say? Ethan looked out the window. She said you're doing your best with what you have. 4 blocks passed in silence. Then Ethan's small voice again. Mom, are we poor? I pulled into our apartment complex parking lot, put the car in park, and turned to face him. No, we're not poor. We're financially secure. Very secure. Then why does Aunt Caroline talk like we're not? Because she doesn't know the whole story. And I haven't corrected her assumptions. Why not? I thought about how to answer that. Because I wanted to see who would treat us well regardless of what they thought we had. He processed that. And Aunt Caroline didn't? No, she didn't. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I made a call I'd been avoiding. Maria Chen, a family law attorney I'd worked with 2 years ago on a security clearance issue. Maria, it's Rebecca Harper. I need advice, but this isn't about work. She listened while I laid out the situation. The co-signing 18 months ago, the continued payments, Caroline's comments, the church testimony about helping her struggling sister. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Rebecca, she said finally, you have every legal right to remove yourself as co-signer. The question is whether you want to. I want to set a boundary that has consequences. Then we'll need to give them formal notice. 60 days is standard. I can draft the documents. But I need to ask you something first. Go ahead. Why now? If they've been taking advantage for 16 months, why draw the line today? Because I just found out my son thinks he's a burden. Because Caroline's been building a public narrative about helping me while privately undermining my child's self-worth. Because I'm done teaching Ethan that tolerating disrespect is the same as keeping peace. Maria was quiet for a beat. All right, I'll prepare the withdrawal documents. But, Rebecca, this will damage your relationship with your sister, possibly permanently. The relationship is already damaged, she just doesn't know it yet. We scheduled a follow-up meeting for the next week to review everything. Tuesday came, and I drove to Ethan's school during my lunch break. Ms. Rodriguez met me in her classroom, a bright space with student artwork covering every wall and afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. Thank you for making time, I said, taking a seat at one of the adult-sized chairs near her desk. Of course. She pulled out a folder with Ethan's name on it. I'm glad you called. I've been wanting to reach out. What have you noticed? She opened the folder and showed me several worksheets. See these eraser marks? The pages were covered with them. Math problems solved correctly, but showing evidence of multiple revisions. Answers changed, then changed back, then changed again. He's second-guessing himself on questions he knows the answer to, she continued. He'll write something, erase it, write it again. Sometimes 3 or 4 times before he settles on an answer. Has this affected his grades? Number. Academically, he's performing well above grade level. Reading comprehension is off the charts. Math is strong. Science projects are consistently excellent. So what's the problem? It's not academic. It's behavioral. She pulled out another document. Last week, he raised his hand to answer a question. When I called on him, he looked around the room first, checking to see if other kids had their hands up too. When he saw he was the only one, he said he forgot what he was going to say. He didn't forget. No. She met my eyes directly. That's a child who's learned that standing out feels dangerous, that being right is somehow wrong if no one else is also right. We talked for another 20 minutes. She asked careful questions about home life, recent changes, stressors. I gave careful answers. Enough truth to be helpful. Not so much that I violated Ethan's privacy. Has anything changed in your extended family dynamics? She asked. That's perceptive. I work with 10-year-olds. They're terrible at hiding when adults are making them uncomfortable. I told her about the Sunday dinners, the comments, the patterns I was only now recognizing. Not everything. Not the money, not the church testimony. Just enough for her to understand that Ethan had been absorbing messages about his worth that I'd failed to intercept. What can I do? I asked. Model what you want him to learn. If someone's treating him unfairly, show him what boundary setting looks like. If he's apologizing for taking up space, show him that his presence matters. Kids learn more from what we do than what we say. Before I left, I stopped at the school office. The secretary looked up from her computer. Can I help you? I'm Rebecca Harper, Ethan's mom. I wanted to ask about after-school programs. Anything science-related? She pulled up a list. We have Science Olympiad, meets Tuesdays and Thursdays. Is Ethan currently enrolled? She checked her records, then looked up with a slight frown. He was enrolled at the start of the year. He withdrew about 3 weeks ago. Did he give a reason? She clicked through a few more screens. According to this, he told the coach he didn't have time anymore. Ethan had plenty of time. What he didn't have was the confidence that wanting something, choosing something for himself, was allowed. I drove home taking the long route, the one that went past Caroline's neighborhood. I'd been to her house dozens of times, but had never really looked at it the way I was looking now. The roof was in good condition. The siding was clean and well maintained. The landscaping was neat, but not elaborate. 2 cars in the driveway. Her Lexus and David's truck. Nothing about the exterior suggested financial crisis, past or present. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot 2 blocks away and opened my laptop. Not the business one. I used that for clients. This was different. This was personal. I created a document. Title, Vulnerability Assessment, Caroline Bennett. Under subject information, I filled in what I knew for certain. Employment status misrepresented. David. Financial assistance continued 16 months beyond stated need. Pattern of comments designed to undermine child's self-worth. Documented. Public narrative inconsistent with private behavior. Under suspected actions. Using perceived struggle to enhance own image. Community narrative about helping struggling sister. Possible damage to reputation/professional standing if truth revealed. Under required verification. Scope of public statements. Extent of community knowledge. Documentation of actual financial status. I needed confirmation. I needed to know if Caroline had taken this public, or if Lisa Martinez's church group was an isolated incident. The answer came piece by piece over the next 2 weeks. Piece 1. I ran into Caroline's neighbor at the post office, Mrs. Henderson, probably early 60s, the kind of woman who knows everyone's business and shares it with good intentions. Rebecca Harper, right? You're Caroline's sister? That's right. She's such a good person, your sister. The way she talks about helping you manage everything on your own. Real family values. I smiled and nodded and said nothing while that cold feeling in my chest expanded. Piece 2. My mother called on a Wednesday evening. Casual conversation that turned pointed. Caroline mentioned you might need some help with Ethan over Thanksgiving. If you're working, he could stay with them for a few days. I'm not working Thanksgiving. We'll be at dinner like always. Oh, Caroline said your schedule was unpredictable, that sometimes you have to work holidays. My schedule is posted on the fridge a month in advance. There's nothing unpredictable about it. Silence. Then, well, maybe she misunderstood. Maybe. Piece 3 came from an unexpected source. David called me directly. Not Caroline, David. We didn't have that kind of relationship in 16 years of them being married. We'd maybe spoken on the phone 3 times, and always about logistics. Rebecca. His voice was strained. I need to talk to you about something. Caroline doesn't know I'm calling. Okay. I got my job back in May of last year. I know. Silence. Then, how long have you known? I did basic research, David. LinkedIn, company website, public information. Christ. He sounded exhausted. I tried to tell her we should stop accepting your help, multiple times. She said we'd earned it. That family helps family. Earned it how? By being there for you. By providing stability for Ethan when you couldn't. Her words, not mine. I didn't respond. Let the silence do the work. David continued, rushing now like he needed to get it all out. I'm not proud of any of this. I should have pushed harder. Should have stopped the transfers myself. But marriage is complicated, and Caroline, she gets an idea in her head about how things should be, and it's hard to change her mind. Is there something specific you called to tell me? Yeah, she's planning something for Thanksgiving. I don't know what exactly, but she's been anxious about it. Talking about family loyalty, about people needing to be grateful, I thought you should know. I appreciate the warning. After we hung up, I sat with that information. Caroline was planning something, probably a big gesture, offering to host Christmas, or suggesting Ethan spend spring break with them, or some other public display of generosity that would cement her narrative while putting me in a position where refusing would make me look ungrateful. I pulled up my business account and checked the balance. The Arlington Tech contract had come through, first payment deposited. Another $47,000 sitting there, added to the existing reserves. Revenue year-to-date was tracking toward $1.2 million. After expenses and taxes, I'd clear close to $600,000 for the year. And my sister was telling people I needed help making ends meet. The irony was almost funny. Almost. The week before Thanksgiving, my mother called with the expected invitation. You're coming Thursday, right? Caroline's bringing sweet potato casserole. What can you bring? I can make a pie. Perfect. 4 o'clock? We'll be there. I hung up and looked at Ethan, who was doing homework at the kitchen table. We're going to Grandma's for Thanksgiving. He didn't look up from his math problems. Okay, this time might be different. That got his attention. His pencil stopped moving. Different how? I'm going to say some things that need to be said. It might be uncomfortable. If you want to stay home with Mrs. Chen, that's completely fine. He thought about it for longer than I expected. Finally, will you be okay? Yes. Then I want to come. You don't have to. I know, but I want to see it. See what? He met my eyes, and there was something in them I hadn't seen in months. Determination. You standing up. Thanksgiving morning started clear and cold, temperature in the low 40s. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table reviewing the documents Maria had prepared. Formal notice of withdrawal from cosigner obligation. 60-day timeline. Legal protection language. Everything proper and professional and designed to minimize my liability while making my position absolutely clear. I'd already signed them. They were in a folder in my bag, along with 3 other items. The notebook documenting Caroline's comments, the bank statements showing 18 months of transfers, and a printout of David's LinkedIn profile showing continuous employment, not for revenge, for clarity. So when Caroline tried to reframe this as me being unreasonable or ungrateful, the facts would speak for themselves. Ethan dressed carefully for dinner. Button-up shirt, khakis, his good shoes. He stood in front of the mirror for a long time, adjusting his collar. You look great. I want to look like I belong. You always belong. He nodded, but I could see he didn't quite believe it. Not yet. We arrived at my parents' house at 3:55. Caroline's car was already there, parked at that familiar angle that took up just a little more than its share of space. Owen and Emma were in the front yard, tossing a football back and forth. Inside, the house smelled like turkey and pie, and all the traditional scents that were supposed to mean comfort and family. My mother hugged us both. My father was in the kitchen, carving the bird with the precision of a man who'd served in the army for 20 years before retiring. Caroline came out of the dining room with a smile that looked rehearsed. There you are, right on time for once. We're always on time. She laughed. I know, I'm teasing. She turned to Ethan. Hey, buddy, excited about dinner? Yes, Aunt Caroline. Good. We've got a lot to be thankful for this year. She said it looking at me, not him. Dinner was set at 4:30. Everyone took their usual seats, but I noticed Caroline had added place cards this year. Something new. Ethan was seated between Emma and Caroline. I was at the opposite end, next to David. Strategic positioning. Caroline wanted control of the conversation, and she'd arranged the seating to maximize her ability to direct it. We held hands for grace. My father said the blessing. We passed dishes. Polite conversation about the food, the weather, plans for Black Friday shopping. Everything felt choreographed. Halfway through the meal, Caroline set down her fork and smiled at my parents. So Mom, Dad, David, and I have been talking. We want to do something nice for Rebecca and Ethan this Christmas. My mother looked pleased. That's sweet of you. We were thinking maybe a trip somewhere warm. Disney World, maybe. The kids could all go together, make some memories. That's generous, I said carefully. Caroline's smile widened. You've been so stressed lately. I thought you could use a break. You work so much, and it takes a toll. The work is fine. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. You say that, but I worry. Single parenting is hard enough without a demanding career on top of it. The table went quiet. My father set down his fork. My mother's hand went to her throat. What's that supposed to mean? Caroline's voice had an edge now. It means I'm tired of implications disguised as concern. Caroline laughed, but it sounded forced. I don't make implications. I just care about you and Ethan. I kept my voice level. My hands relaxed on the table. You've made 23 comments in the last 2 years about Ethan needing a father figure. 17 about my work schedule being unsustainable. 9 about stability and consistency being essential for children. I counted them. My mother inhaled sharply. Rebecca. I ignored her, keeping my eyes on Caroline. You spoke at Lisa Martinez's church group about helping your struggling sister. About supporting single mothers who can't manage on their own. Caroline's face flushed. I was talking generally. Were you? Because Lisa knew exactly who you meant. And now my son's classmates are telling him we're poor and need help. Ethan stared at his plate. Emma looked confused. Owen had stopped eating entirely. David set his napkin down. Caroline. Don't, she snapped at him. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, set it on the table. Not opened yet, just present. What's that? My mother's voice was barely audible. Context. Caroline's eyes fixed on the folder like it contained something dangerous. You don't need to do this. You made it necessary. My father leaned forward, his veteran's instinct for assessing situations kicking in. What's going on? I opened the folder, pulled out the first document. 18 months ago, Caroline asked me to co-sign their mortgage refinance because David was unemployed. I looked at Caroline, then at my parents. I agreed to help. I set up automatic transfers, $2,800 every month. My mother gasped softly. I pulled out the bank statements, $61,600. Transferred over 18 months, plus additional expenses I covered. Caroline's voice rose. We needed that help. David's voice cut through, quiet but firm. Caroline, stop. She whirled on him. Shut up. I pulled out the third document, David's LinkedIn profile, showing continuous employment at Bennett and Associates since 2019. No gap. My father put on his reading glasses and took the document, read it carefully. When he looked up at David, his expression was one I recognized from my childhood. Disappointment mixed with expectation of truth. You've been working since when? David wouldn't look at Caroline. I got my job back in May of last year, 2 months after we asked for help. The room felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out. Caroline's face was red. We had other expenses. We needed time to catch up financially. For 16 months, I kept my voice level. While telling my son his life is incomplete because his mother works too much, I never said that. Ethan's voice quiet but clear. Yes, you did. Everyone turned to look at him. He didn't shrink. He sat up straighter. You said kids need 2 parents. You said I'd be better if Dad was here. You told Emma that Mom works a lot because she has to. Because it's just us. You said some kids are naturally better at things and some aren't. His voice didn't waver. He was just stating facts, the way I'd taught him to present information in school projects. Caroline's eyes filled with tears. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I asked. She shook her head, couldn't answer. I pulled out the final document, the legal notice Maria had drafted, slid it across the table. This is formal notification that I'm withdrawing as co-signer on your mortgage. You have 60 days to refinance without me. You can't do this. I can and I am. Caroline looked at my parents. Are you going to let her do this? My father's voice was quiet but carried weight. Let her? She's a grown woman making a decision about her own finances. This is between you and Rebecca. Mom? Caroline's voice cracked. My mother looked between us, torn. I don't understand how we got here. I stood up slowly, deliberately, put my hand on Ethan's shoulder. We got here because I stayed quiet while someone I loved undermined my child's sense of worth. That ends today. Ethan stood without hesitation, grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Caroline's voice followed us to the door. You're really going to destroy this family over pride? I turned back one last time. I'm protecting my son. That's not pride. That's parenting. We walked out into the cold November evening, got in the car, drove 3 blocks in silence before Ethan spoke. Mom? Yeah? Thank you. For what? For not letting hers make me small anymore. I reached over and squeezed his hand. You were never small. I just stopped letting anyone convince you that you were. When we got home, my phone was already lighting up with messages. From my mother, from Caroline, even one from David. I silenced the phone, made hot chocolate, sat with Ethan on the couch while he told me about the Thanksgiving episode of his favorite show. Normal things, regular things, the kind of evening we deserved. Later, after he went to bed, I sat in the quiet apartment and thought about what came next. The 60-day timeline would take us into January. Caroline and David would have to refinance or sell. My relationship with my sister was probably damaged beyond repair. But when I checked on Ethan before going to bed myself, I found him sleeping peacefully. No tension in his shoulders, no careful positioning, just a kid, asleep, not carrying weight that wasn't his. That was worth every uncomfortable conversation, every burned bridge, every hard choice. Because the best power isn't the kind people see. It's the kind that protects what matters most. The Friday after Thanksgiving, I woke to 17 missed calls and a dozen text messages. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't read most of the texts. Instead, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table reviewing the Arlington Tech contract one more time. Kickoff meeting Tuesday, site visit Wednesday, preliminary assessment due end of month. Business continued regardless of family chaos. That was one thing I'd always appreciated about consulting work. It demanded performance, not emotional availability. Ethan came out of his room earlier than usual, already dressed for school. Backpack organized by the door, shoes lined up perfectly. "You're ready early? Couldn't sleep much. Bad dreams?" He shook his head. "Good ones, actually. I dreamed we had a house with a room just for books, like a real library." I poured him orange juice and made a mental note. Soon, very soon. At the bus stop, something was different. He climbed the steps, turned, and waved. But this time he smiled. Just a small one, but real. I stood there watching the bus disappear, feeling something shift in my chest. Not relief exactly. More like the release of pressure I hadn't fully registered carrying. At work, Captain Morrison called me into his office before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. "Harper, close the door." I did. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with the kind of attention that came from 25 years of reading people in high-pressure situations. I'm hearing things through unofficial channels. Family situation? Nothing that affects my clearance or job performance, sir. I'm not asking as your commanding officer. He set down the file he'd been holding. I'm asking as someone who's watched good officers implode because they tried to handle everything alone and in silence. I'm handling it. Are you? Or are you just containing it? The distinction landed. I met his eyes. I handled it. Yesterday. It was messy, but it's done. He nodded slowly. Good. Because I'm about to make you an offer that requires you to have your personal foundation solid. He pulled out a different file, slid it across the desk. Defense Intelligence Agency, liaison position, promotion to commander, based in D.C., relocation required by March. I stared at the file without touching it. That's significant. You're overqualified for your current role. Have been for at least 2 years. But you never pushed for advancement. I had my reasons. Kid needs stability. I get it. He tapped the file. But kids are more adaptable than we give them credit for. And this opportunity won't wait forever. Can I think about it? You have until January 15th, not a day longer. After I left his office, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes, staring at the file. Commander, DIA, Washington, D.C. Everything I'd worked toward for 16 years, offered at exactly the moment when I'd just blown up my family relationships. The timing felt like a test. Or maybe just life being life, complicated, inconvenient, full of choices that don't wait for perfect circumstances. I pulled up the real estate listing on my phone. 847 Sycamore Lane, the house I'd bought 2 years ago. Empty, waiting, zero point 0.3 miles from Caroline's carefully maintained image. I called my real estate agent. I want to move in, January 1st if possible. She sounded surprised. Not selling? Number, living in it. Can you have it ready? Absolutely, I'll coordinate everything. After we hung up, I sat there feeling the weight of decisions stacking up. Moving into the house, potentially taking the DC position. 60-day timeline on Caroline's mortgage, all of it happening simultaneously. For someone who liked control and planning, this felt chaotic. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the controlled, invisible life I'd built was exactly what needed to be disrupted. The weekend moved in careful, quiet rhythms. Ethan seemed lighter. He didn't line up his food at meals, didn't check the calendar obsessively. On Saturday, he asked if his friend Lucas could come over. They built an elaborate Lego spaceship, and I heard Ethan laugh. Actually laugh. Not the careful, quiet version he'd been performing for months. Sunday morning, my phone rang. My mother. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. Her voice was careful, measured. "Rebecca, your father and I would like to talk to you. In person, if possible. Not about taking sides, just about understanding. Call me back when you can." I called back that afternoon. We agreed to meet Tuesday evening at a diner halfway between Virginia Beach and Richmond. Neutral territory. Monday at work, I threw myself into the Arlington Tech Assessment. Reviewed their network architecture documentation, identified preliminary vulnerabilities, drafted the initial findings. Professional, methodical, exactly the kind of work that steadied my mind. The new contract was worth $95,000. Combined with the other projects in my pipeline, I was looking at $340,000 in business revenue over the next quarter. The consulting firm I'd built in secret was becoming harder to hide. Not that I wanted to hide it anymore. Tuesday evening, I drove to the diner. My parents were already there, coffee ordered, sitting across from each other in a booth near the back. I slid in next to my mother. Nobody spoke right away. Finally, my father broke the silence. "We didn't know. About the money. About how long David had been working." "I know you didn't." My mother's hands wrapped around her coffee cup like she needed the warmth. Caroline called us, multiple times. She's devastated. She should be. Rebecca, please, she's your sister. She undermined my son for 18 months while taking money she didn't need. I kept my voice level. That's not sisterhood. That's exploitation. My father cleared his throat. She said you humiliated her in front of the family. I provided facts. If facts are humiliating, the behavior was wrong. They sat with that for a moment. Then my mother said something I didn't expect. You're right. I looked at her. About all of it, she continued. Your father and I have been talking for days. We've watched Caroline for years, really. The way she talks about you, the comparisons. We told ourselves it was just sibling rivalry, that you were both adults and could handle it yourselves. We were wrong. My father added, we should have said something sooner. Should have shut down those comments instead of letting them accumulate. Why didn't you? He looked uncomfortable. Because keeping peace felt easier than addressing conflict. Because we learned from our parents that family loyalty meant not making waves. But watching you walk out on Thanksgiving, seeing Ethan's face when Caroline said those things, he shook his head. Peace isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's just silence in the face of harm. We talked for over an hour. I showed them the same documents I'd shown at Thanksgiving, explained the timeline, walked through Caroline's public narrative about helping her struggling sister. When I finished, my mother had tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry we let this go on. You didn't let it happen. You just didn't see it clearly. We should have. My father leaned forward, his veteran's posture straightening. That promotion Morrison mentioned. You should take it. How do you know about that? I didn't. But you have that look. The one you get when you're deciding between the safe path and the risk. He held my gaze. Take the risk. Ethan will adapt, and some distance from all this might be good for both of you. Before we parted, my mother hugged me tighter than usual. We love you. Both of you. That doesn't mean we agree with everything Caroline did. I know, but she's still our daughter. We're going to try to help her understand where she went wrong. That's your choice. Just don't ask me to pretend it didn't happen. We won't. The following week unfolded in layers of old life ending and new life beginning. Caroline sent emails. The first was angry, accusing me of vindictiveness and cruelty. The second was defensive, listing all the reasons she'd been justified in her actions. The third was pleading, begging me to reconsider, promising things would be different. I didn't respond to any of them. The 60-day notice was legal and binding. My silence was intentional. On Wednesday, David called. Not Caroline, David. His voice was rough, tired. I need to tell you something. I've filed for separation. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be, this has been coming for years. He paused. She built her entire identity around being the stable one, the one who had it all together, the one who made the right choices. When that started cracking, she needed someone else to be unstable so she could feel superior by comparison. And I was convenient. You were generous. She took advantage. There was another pause. I'm not calling to ask you to change your mind about the co-signing. I'm calling because Owen and Emma asked about Ethan. They miss him. I miss them too. Would you be willing to let them see each other? Not at family events. Just kids being cousins. I thought about it, yes. But arrangements go through you, not Caroline. Understood, thank you. At home, Ethan was changing in ways I noticed daily. He rejoined Science Olympiad, started raising his hand in class again. Ms. Rodriguez sent an email. Whatever changed at home, keep doing it. He's engaged, confident, participating. It's wonderful to see. One afternoon, Lucas came over again. They worked on a science project together, something about solar system scale models. I heard them debating planetary distances, laughing when their calculations didn't match, problem-solving together. After Lucas left, Ethan came into the kitchen where I was reviewing contract documents. Mom? Yeah. Can I ask you something? Always. Are you mad at Aunt Caroline? I'm disappointed in her choices. Will we ever see her again? Maybe, when she's ready to be honest and treat us with respect. But we won't go back to how things were. Good. He said it simply, firmly. I didn't like how things were. By mid-December, the house was ready. I'd had it professionally cleaned, utilities transferred, minor repairs completed. The movers were scheduled for December 28th. I told Ethan over hot chocolate one evening, showing him the listing photos on my laptop. His eyes went wide. This is ours? Has been for 2 years. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to wait for the right time. And I wanted you to understand that we didn't need to look wealthy to be secure. He scrolled through the photos slowly, stopping on the room with built-in bookshelves. Can this be my room? Absolutely. He looked at me, something uncertain in his expression. Aunt Caroline lives near there, doesn't she? She does. Will that be weird? Probably. But her being uncomfortable doesn't mean we make ourselves smaller. We take up the space we've earned. He smiled, real, genuine, the kind of smile I'd been missing for months. When do we move? 2 weeks. Then he asked quietly, Mom, does this mean things are really different now? Yes, things are really different. Good. Christmas was just the two of us. We spent Christmas Eve packing, sorting belongings, deciding what came with us to the new house and what stayed behind. My parents came by Christmas morning with gifts and helped load boxes into a rented truck. My mother stood in the empty living room after most of our things were packed. This apartment served its purpose. It did. But you're ready for more. I was always ready. I just wanted to make sure I was doing it for the right reasons. And now you are? Now I'm done with strategic invisibility. It protected nothing and taught the wrong lessons. We moved into 847 Sycamore Lane on a cold, clear December 28th. Moving truck in the driveway. Ethan running from room to room, claiming spaces, planning furniture arrangements. Halfway through unloading, I saw Caroline's car drive by slowly. She didn't stop, didn't wave, just drove past. And I watched until her taillights disappeared. My father, carrying a box of books, noticed. You okay? Fine. Must be strange for her, realizing you've had this the whole time. That's the point. She made assumptions. I let her. Now she knows what assumptions cost. That evening, after the movers left and my parents drove home, and Ethan was asleep in his new room with the built-in bookshelves, I stood on the back porch looking at the yard. The house was larger than we needed. The neighborhood was familiar. And yes, Caroline lived less than half a mile away. I could have chosen anywhere. Could have moved to a different city entirely. But running away wasn't the lesson I wanted to teach my son. Standing your ground was. New Year's came with new routines. Ethan's new school was 3 blocks away, close enough to walk when weather permitted. They had a robotics program that he joined immediately. Within a week, he'd made 2 new friends who shared his interest in coding and space exploration. I set up a proper home office in the converted bedroom upstairs. 2 monitors, encrypted server, soundproofing for client calls. Harper Security Consulting had official headquarters now. The business grew faster than I'd anticipated. Word of mouth from Arlington Tech led to 3 more inquiries by mid-January. A defense contractor in Maryland, a tech firm in Northern Virginia, a government agency that required additional security clearances but paid accordingly. By January 15th, Captain Morrison's deadline, I had $340,000 in confirmed contracts and another $200,000 in proposals under review. I accepted the DIA position. Ethan took the news calmly. We'd discussed the possibility over several conversations. He'd researched schools in the DC area, looked at neighborhoods, asked practical questions about commute times and robotics programs. So we're moving again? In about 18 months. I'll start commuting in March, then we'll relocate fully by next summer when you finish 6th grade. Will we keep this house? As an investment, we'll rent it out. He nodded, processing. Can we get an apartment near a metro station? I want to be able to explore the city. We can absolutely do that. Cool. His calm acceptance reminded me that kids could handle change when they felt secure in what mattered. What mattered wasn't the house or the city, it was us, together, honest, valued. In early February, an envelope arrived in the mail. Handwritten address, nice stationery. Inside was a letter from Caroline. The handwriting was careful, like she'd drafted it multiple times before committing to paper. Rebecca, I've been in therapy since December, 3 times a week. My therapist suggested I write this, not because you owe me anything, but because I owe you truth. Oh, I was jealous of your clarity, your purpose, your ability to make hard choices and live with them. I chose teaching because it seemed safe, marriage because it seemed expected, kids because that's what you do. And I woke up at 42 not knowing who I am without those roles. It was easier to criticize your choices than face my own emptiness. You didn't need my help. I needed to feel needed. I needed to be the stable one, the generous one, the one who had it all figured out. I built a narrative about struggling single mothers to make myself the hero of a story that wasn't mine to tell. I damaged Ethan in the process. I damaged you, I damaged myself. I don't know if we can rebuild what I broke, but I wanted you to know I finally see what I did. Not what I meant to do, what I actually did. I'm sorry. Caroline, I read it twice. Then I put it in a drawer without responding immediately. The letter felt genuine, but apologies are easy. Changed behavior is hard. I'd wait to see which one Caroline actually committed to. March came with the keynote invitation. A phone call from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Women in Defense Leadership Conference. They wanted me to speak at their annual event in Washington, D.C. The topic: integrating military service with entrepreneurship. The speaking fee: $25,000. The audience: 500 plus women in defense and intelligence fields. I accepted. When I told Ethan, he looked at me with something like awe. You're going to speak in front of 500 people? That's the plan. Mom, that's huge. It's just a speech. No. He shook his head. It's you showing people what you do. That's different. He was right. It was different. It was the first time I'd let the two parts of my life, Navy officer and business owner, occupy the same space publicly. I prepared for the keynote through March, writing and revising, practicing delivery. The title: Strategic Invisibility: How Women Build Leverage in Defense Sectors. It was essentially my life story, just without naming names. The morning of the keynote, I put on a suit I'd bought specifically for this. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. The Cartier watch I usually hid. Heels that added 3 inches to my height. Ethan saw me before I left for the airport. You look important. I am important. I'm just usually quiet about it. Maybe being loud sometimes is okay too. I hugged him. When did you get so wise? I have a good teacher. The conference was at the Marriott Wardman Park. Registration desk, name badge, program booklet with my headshot and bio. Walking through the lobby, I saw women in uniform, business suits, academic regalia. All of them there to learn, connect, advance. Dr. Walsh found me during lunch. Rebecca, thank you for coming. Your background is exactly what our audience needs. Successful integration of service and private sector work. I'm happy to share what I've learned. The keynote slot was after lunch, prime positioning. The ballroom was full when I walked out. 500 faces looking at me expectantly. I told them the truth. Not all of it, not the family drama, but the framework. How I'd built a business in the margins of military service. How I'd stayed invisible until I had enough leverage to be visible on my own terms. How strategic patience wasn't weakness, just wisdom about timing. The speech I'd planned was 25 minutes. I spoke for 38, adding stories and insights that emerged in the moment, answering questions I could see forming before anyone asked them. When I finished, the applause lasted long enough that I felt it resonate in my chest. Afterward, during the networking reception, women approached with business cards and questions. 2 job offers, 4 consulting inquiries, 1 invitation to join an advisory board. Dr. Walsh pulled me aside. That was exceptional. We'd like you back next year. Maybe a full-day workshop? I'd be honored. Flying home that evening, I checked my business account. 3 new contract inquiries had come in during the conference, both from attendees who'd heard the speech. Combined projected value, $175,000. Harper Security Consulting was becoming something I could no longer call a side business. It was a firm with a reputation, with demand. When I got home late that night, Ethan was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with homework spread out. How was it? I sat down next to him. There were 500 people in the room. I told them about building something meaningful while maintaining integrity. And afterward, people wanted to work with me, learn from me, join what I'm building. Because you're good at what you do. Because I stopped hiding what I'm good at. He nodded, then asked, Mom, why did you hide it for so long? I thought for a long time before answering. Because I grew up watching family take advantage of anyone who had more. I thought if people didn't know what I had, they couldn't use it against me. But I learned something important. What? Hiding doesn't protect you. It just makes you smaller. And teaching you to be small was worse than any risk of being used. By April, the separation was finalized. David and Caroline were officially divorcing. The house was sold. Caroline moved to a smaller apartment closer to her school. She sent me an email with a photo attached. Her first therapy payment receipt, $500. Small, but consistent. The message said, first step of many, not asking for forgiveness, just showing I'm trying. I replied, received. A week later, another message. Ethan's birthday is next month. I'd like to send a gift, if that's okay with you. I showed Ethan the message. Your aunt wants to send a birthday gift. How do you feel about that? He thought carefully. Is she still going to say mean things? Not if she wants to be part of your life. Then okay. In May, we met for coffee, just Caroline and me, a place halfway between our homes. She looked different, thinner, more tired, but somehow more present. Thank you for coming. I nodded. She didn't waste time. David and I are done. It's amicable mostly. We're co-parenting. I'm in therapy 3 times a week. She met my eyes. Turns out I've been depressed for years, just really good at performing fine. I'm sorry you've been struggling. I'm not, she said it firmly. I needed to stop performing. I needed to break apart so I could rebuild into something honest. We talked for 30 minutes about therapy, about what she was learning, about the ways she'd used my life to avoid facing her own. It wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. Before we left, she asked, "Can I see Ethan sometime? I don't expect forgiveness. I just want him to know I'm trying to be better." I'll ask him. If he's ready, we'll arrange something. Thank you. I showed Ethan her request that evening. He thought about it for a long time. Maybe, he said finally, but I want you there. Always. In June, 3 months before my DIA position officially started, we met at a park in Richmond. Caroline, Emma, Owen, Ethan, and me. The kids ran ahead to the playground. Caroline and I walked slowly behind. She looked healthier. The exhaustion was still there, but the performance was gone. How's the apartment? Good. Quiet. I'm learning to be okay with quiet. We walked without speaking for a while, watching the kids on the playground equipment. I told them, Caroline said, Owen and Emma, about what I did, about the money, the comments, the way I treated you and Ethan. How did they take it? Emma said she already knew something was wrong. Owen asked if that's why you stopped coming to family dinners. She swallowed hard. I told them yes. I told them I was wrong, that apologies are just words unless behavior changes. Ahead of us, Ethan was showing Emma something on his phone. Owen listened intently. He's different, Caroline said quietly, confident. He always was. He just needed space to show it. You gave him that. I gave him truth. Truth is easier to build on than pretending. Before we left, Caroline handed me an envelope. June payment, $500 toward the $61,000. She met my eyes. It'll take years to pay back. But I'm doing it. Not because you need it. Because I need to. I accepted the envelope. Thank you. That became our pattern. Monthly payments, occasional meetings at the park, slow, careful rebuilding of something that looked nothing like what we'd had before, but felt more honest. By the time I started at DIA in September, life had settled into new rhythms, commuting to DC 3 days a week, working from home 2 days, Ethan thriving in school, in robotics, in friendships, Harper Security Consulting adding clients monthly. My first day at DIA, the commanding officer, a 2-star general, pulled me aside after the welcome briefing. Harper, we brought you in because you see patterns others miss. Don't lose that edge trying to fit in. I won't, sir. Good. We need people who ask uncomfortable questions and follow evidence even when it's inconvenient. That I can do. In November, my mother called. 1 year since the Thanksgiving confrontation. We're doing a small dinner, just immediate family. Will you come? Who's gonna be there? Us, you and Ethan, Caroline, and the kids. David won't be there. He's with someone new. I talked to Ethan. He said yes without hesitation. We arrived at 4 o'clock. Caroline's car was parked normally, no angled dominance of space. Inside, she was helping in the kitchen. When she saw us, she smiled. Genuine, not performed. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the invitation. Dinner was different. Conversation flowed naturally. Caroline asked about Ethan's robotics team and actually listened to his answers. Asked about my work and accepted the information without needing to diminish it. After dinner, while cleaning up, she told me quietly, I got promoted, department chair at my school, administrative role. That's wonderful. I almost didn't apply. My therapist had to push me, she smiled. Therapy is expensive and worth every penny. Later in the living room, my mother brought out old photo albums, pictures of Caroline and me as kids, before competition, before comparison. You two used to be inseparable, my father said. We were, Caroline said quietly. I don't remember when that changed. I do, I said, when we started measuring worth by what we had instead of who we were. My mother looked at the photos. Maybe we all learned the wrong metrics. Driving home, Ethan was quiet but content. That was nice, he said. Yeah, it was. Do you think things will stay better? I think we've established something more important than perfection. We've established honesty. And when you have that, you can handle problems before they become crises. He nodded, satisfied. December came with final decisions. Harper Security Consulting had grown to the point where I hired my first employee, a recent MIT grad with strong technical skills and a need for mentorship. Revenue for the year would top $1.8 million. Net worth, including real estate and investments, $2.9 million. I bought a condo in Arlington for our move the following summer. 2 bedrooms, close to Metro, close to DIA headquarters, close to excellent schools. On Ethan's 11th birthday, we had cake at the new house in Richmond, the one we'd be leaving in 6 months but would always own. He asked about the future. Are we going to stay in DC? For a while, maybe a long while. Why? I like it when things change now I didn't used to. What's different? He thought about it. Before, change felt like things might get worse. Now it feels like things might get better. That's a good way to look at it. Then he asked, Mom, are we rich? I set down my fork. Depends on how you define rich. Like money. We're financially secure, very secure, more than most people. How much more? Enough that you never have to worry about having what you need. But not so much that you should expect what you want without earning it. He absorbed that. Is that why you didn't tell people before? I wanted you to understand that money is a tool, not an identity. And I wanted to know who would value us for who we are versus what we have. Did you figure it out? Yes. The people who matter care about who we are. Everyone else is just noise. Before bed, he hugged me tighter than usual. Thanks, Mom. For what? For showing me that being strong doesn't mean being loud. For teaching me that the best power is the kind people don't see until you decide to use it. I held my son, brilliant, perceptive, no longer apologizing for existing, and felt something I'd been chasing for years finally settle into place. Not perfection, not victory, just alignment between who I was and how I lived. That evening, after Ethan was asleep, I sat on the back porch and looked at the yard we'd be leaving, the house we'd be renting out, the neighborhood where Caroline lived less than a mile away. I thought about the journey from invisibility to visibility, from strategic silence to necessary voice, from protecting Ethan by absorbing hits to protecting him by teaching him to stand. My phone buzzed. An email from Dr. Walsh. Rebecca, we've had incredible feedback on your keynote. Would you consider a permanent role on our advisory board, compensation included? I replied, yes, let's discuss details. Another email came in. A consulting inquiry from a Fortune 500 company. Potential contract value, $250,000. Harper Security Consulting wasn't a side business anymore. It was a legacy I was building, one that Ethan could see, learn from, maybe one day contribute to. But more than the business or the money or the promotions or the success, what mattered was simpler. My son no longer thought he was a burden. He knew he was valued, not for being easy, not for being convenient, but for being himself. And I'd learned that the power I'd been hiding all these years wasn't really power until it protected what mattered most. Not accounts or assets or achievements, but the child who needed to see his mother stand up and speak truth, even when it cost comfort, even when it meant burning bridges and rebuilding from honesty instead of pretense. We'd made it through, not unscathed, but whole, and that was worth everything.